Never beg to be loved. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a principle in life that if ignored leads to endless suffering. Never beg to be loved. The moment you plead for love, you relinquish your self-respect. You turn yourself into a petitioner rather than a participant in the relationship. And the truth is, no one truly values what is handed to them on demand. What we treasure most in life is what we voluntarily choose. Love is no different. Real love, deep, meaningful, and lasting love, emerges not from desperation, but from strength. If someone does not choose you freely, their love is not love at all. It is obligation at best, manipulation at worst. Many people fall into the trap of thinking that if they just prove themselves, if they just give more, if they just endure a little longer, they will eventually earn the affection they seek. But that is not how relationships work. Love is not a prize at the end of a long and humiliating endurance test. It is a bond formed between two people who recognize and respect each other's intrinsic worth. If you trade your dignity for affection, you invite only exploitation. If you sacrifice your values to be loved, you may gain temporary approval, but you will lose something far more valuable: yourself. No love is worth the price of your self-respect. What do instead? You build yourself. You cultivate your strengths, take on responsibility, and strive towards something meaningful. You become a person who does not need to beg because your very presence is an asset. You attract genuine love not by chasing it, but by becoming someone worthy of it. And if someone does not see your value, walk away, not out of spite, but out of wisdom. The world is vast, and somewhere there are people who will love you without conditions. But you will never find them if you are too busy pleading for the attention of those who do not. Never beg to be loved. Instead, become someone who makes love a privilege to give. Mutual choice is the foundation of any meaningful relationship. The moment a relationship becomes one-sided, where one person is constantly pleading for attention, validation, or love, it ceases to be based on genuine affection and instead becomes an arrangement built on uneven power dynamics. If someone truly values and respects you, they will choose you freely, without coercion or manipulation. Love that is freely given holds immeasurable power because it is rooted in sincerity, not necessity. People often fall into the trap of thinking they can earn love through persistence, self-sacrifice, or blind devotion. They believe that if they prove their worth over time, the other person will eventually reciprocate their feelings. But love does not work like that. Love is not a debt to be repaid, nor is it a prize to be won through sheer endurance. It is either given willingly, or it does not exist at all. The danger of pursuing love at all costs is that it leads to a cycle of self-abandonment. The more you beg for someone's affection, the more you compromise yourself. You start suppressing your opinions, overlooking your own needs, and bending over backward to avoid conflict. You trade your identity for approval, thinking that if you become exactly what the other person wants, they will finally see your worth. But in doing so, you reinforce the idea that your value is dependent on their validation rather than your own intrinsic qualities. This pattern of submission for affection is a destructive one. When someone senses that you are willing to do anything to keep them, they may begin to take you for granted. They may not even do this intentionally, but human nature dictates that we often devalue what is readily available and overestimate the worth of what is scarce. The more you give in the hopes of being loved, the more you make yourself dispensable. Beyond that, relationships built on obligation rather than desire breed resentment. If you have to chase someone, convince them, or plead for their love, you will always feel insecure. You will always wonder if their affection is real or if they are simply tolerating you. And the more you suppress your real thoughts and feelings in fear of losing them, the more the relationship becomes a performance rather than an authentic connection. It is crucial to understand that a relationship should not feel like a test you are constantly trying to pass. You should not have to prove your worth to someone who truly cares for you. Love should be reciprocal, not a one-sided effort where you are the only one investing time, energy, and emotion. A healthy relationship is built on mutual appreciation, shared effort, and an equal sense of commitment. If someone is hesitant about you, uncertain about their feelings, or unwilling to invest in the relationship, take that as your answer. Trying to convince them otherwise is an act of self-betrayal. It is far better to walk away and preserve your dignity than to stay and diminish yourself in an attempt to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. The right person will never need to be persuaded to love you. One of the most powerful things you can do in life is recognize your own value and refuse to settle for anything less than genuine reciprocated affection. When you live with that mindset, you attract people who see your worth without you having to convince them. You draw in relationships based on mutual choice rather than desperation. You become someone who is respected because you respect yourself. At the core of it all is this: a relationship is only truly fulfilling when both people choose each other freely, without pressure, without pleading, without one person feeling like they must prove themselves constantly to be worthy of love. Anything less than that is not love. It is dependence, it is insecurity, it is an arrangement that will inevitably lead to pain. Mutual choice is the foundation of any meaningful relationship. The moment one person has to beg, chase, or plead for love, the dynamic shifts from a healthy connection to an imbalanced power structure. If love is not freely given, it loses its essence. Love that is born from obligation, guilt, or persistence is not genuine love at all. It is an arrangement built on uneven footing, where one person holds all the emotional leverage while the other constantly fights for their place. A relationship should be a space where both people choose each other every day, not a situation where one person is desperately trying to prove their worth to someone who remains indifferent. There is an illusion that many people fall into. The belief that if they just try harder, if they just give more, if they just become the perfect version of what they think the other person wants, then love will come. They believe that love is something that can be earned through effort alone, as though human connection follows the same principles as hard work leading to success in a career. But love does not operate within that structure. It is not something that can be coerced, nor is it a transaction where devotion guarantees reciprocation. If someone does not choose you freely without hesitation, then what they offer is not real affection, but rather a toleration of your presence. And toleration is not love. Begging for love is a slow erosion of self-respect. The more you chase someone, the more they pull away. The more you plead for attention, the less they see your value. It is a paradox that many fail to recognize until they've already exhausted themselves trying to prove their worth. When you make someone the center of your world while they see you as an afterthought, you are setting yourself up for emotional devastation. You start compromising your needs, suppressing your thoughts, and changing yourself in ways that are unnatural just to fit into a mold that might make you more desirable to them, but in doing so, you become a mere shadow of who you once were, sacrificing the very things that made you unique in the first place. What many fail to realize is that true love is not about convincing someone to care. If a person does not see your value on their own, then their affection, even if eventually given, will always feel conditional. There will always be a lingering sense of insecurity, a need to keep proving yourself so that you do not lose whatever little love you have managed to obtain. Love should never feel like an endless trial where you are constantly trying to prove your worthiness to someone who cannot decide if you are good enough. If they cannot see your worth without you having to beg for it, then they are not meant for you. When one person is forced to beg, compromise, and diminish themselves for the sake of keeping another close, resentment inevitably follows. There will come a point where you look back and realize how much of yourself you have given up just to hold on to something that was never truly yours. You will resent the fact that you settled for breadcrumbs when you should have demanded a feast. You will resent the fact that you tolerated emotional neglect, waiting for the day the other person would wake up and realize your worth. But that day rarely comes, and even if it does, it often arrives too late, when the damage has already been done, when you have already emptied yourself in the process of waiting. There is power in knowing when to walk away. There is strength in recognizing that love in its truest form is never something that needs to be begged for. The right people will see your value without you having to prove it. The right people will choose you because they genuinely want to, not because they have been persuaded, worn down, or guilted into staying. Love, when real, is effortless in its existence. Competence and responsibility are far more attractive than neediness. A person who is desperate for love, who constantly seeks validation, who defines their worth by whether or not someone chooses them, projects a sense of dependence that is inherently unattractive. People are drawn to strength, to confidence, to individuals who have a sense of purpose beyond seeking external approval. The more you build yourself, the more you cultivate skills, discipline, and self-respect, the less you will ever feel the need to beg for anyone's affection. Love is not something that should be chased. It is something that is naturally attracted to those who are fulfilled in themselves. When someone operates from a place of desperation, they make poor decisions. They accept mistreatment, they overlook red flags, they compromise their values, all because they are terrified of being alone. They seek love not from a place of abundance, but from a place of lack. And when you seek from lack, you do not seek wisely. You latch onto the first person who gives you a sliver of attention, regardless of whether they treat you well or align with your values. You tolerate disrespect because you fear that letting go means you will end up with nothing. But this mindset only leads to disappointment, because love built on insecurity is never stable. It is fragile, always on the edge of breaking, always requiring constant reassurance. Instead of seeking validation from others, the priority should be becoming a person of competence, someone who has goals, a sense of mission, a reason to wake up in the morning beyond whether or not someone sends them a text message. When you cultivate your strengths, when you take on responsibility, when you pursue meaningful work, you develop an internal sense of worth that is not dependent on whether or not another person chooses you. This is what makes someone genuinely attractive, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It is not the person who begs for love who is desired. It is the person who moves through the world with purpose, with a sense of direction, with the knowledge that their value is not defined by external validation. People respect those who respect themselves. If you do not hold yourself to a high standard, no one else will. If you constantly lower your boundaries, if you tolerate disrespect, if you accept inconsistency, you are signaling to the world that you do not believe you are worth more. And people will treat you accordingly. They will give you the bare minimum because they know you will accept it. They will come and go as they please because they know you will always be there, waiting. They will not see you as a priority because you have not positioned yourself as one. But the moment you start valuing yourself, the entire dynamic shifts. You will no longer tolerate half-hearted affection. You will no longer beg for what should be given freely. You will no longer accept anything less than the love and respect you deserve. The key to all of this is shifting your focus from seeking love to building yourself. When you are competent, when you are strong, when you are responsible, love becomes a byproduct of the person you have become. You do not need to chase it because it naturally gravitates toward you. People are drawn to those who have a sense of self, who stand firm in their values, who do not crumble at the thought of being alone. This is not arrogance. It is simply the understanding that a person's worth is not dependent on another's approval. When you operate from a place of competence rather than neediness, you see relationships differently. You no longer approach love with the mindset of, I need someone to complete me. Instead, you approach it with, I am already whole, and I will only welcome someone into my life if they add value. This shift in mindset changes everything. It places you in a position of strength rather than desperation. It allows you to make choices based on mutual respect rather than fear of abandonment. It ensures that the love you receive is not something you had to beg for, but something you inspired by being the kind of person who naturally commands respect. The operation was aborted. The danger of submitting for affection is that it leads to a slow and often unnoticed erosion of the self. When a person is desperate for love, they begin to sacrifice pieces of who they are in exchange for the slightest bit of validation. They silence their opinions to avoid conflict, they adjust their behavior to fit someone else's expectations, and they suppress their own needs because they fear that expressing them might push the other person away. Over time, this submission does not bring them closer to love. It distances them from their own identity. And a relationship that requires self-abandonment is not love, it is emotional servitude. At the core of this issue is a fundamental misunderstanding of what makes relationships meaningful. A connection that is based on one person constantly giving while the other simply receives is not a balanced partnership. It is a power dynamic where one person holds all the control and the other exists in a state of insecurity. The moment you begin changing yourself in an attempt to hold on to someone, you are no longer in an authentic relationship. You are performing a role, one that you believe will make you more likable, more acceptable, more worthy of being loved. But in doing so, you are teaching the other person that your love is conditional upon their approval rather than something that stands on its own. Love should never require you to abandon your values, your dignity, or your self-respect. If you find yourself constantly bending to accommodate someone who would not do the same for you, then what you have is not love, it is submission. And submission in relationships does not breed closeness. It breeds resentment. Over time, the more you compromise yourself to keep another person happy, the more bitterness will grow beneath the surface. You will begin to feel unseen, unheard, and unappreciated, but you will also struggle to blame anyone but yourself because you were the one who allowed it to happen. This is how people lose themselves in relationships, not overnight, but gradually in a series of small, seemingly insignificant concessions that eventually add up to a complete loss of self. Another danger of submitting for affection is that it invites mistreatment. People do not respect those who do not respect themselves. If someone sees that you are willing to tolerate poor treatment, that you are afraid to set boundaries, that you will endure neglect or emotional distance just to keep them in your life, they will start to believe that they can behave however they please without consequence. They may not even do this consciously, but human nature is such that people will test limits. And if your limits are endlessly flexible, if your self-worth is so dependent on their approval that you never push back, you will inevitably find yourself in a situation where you are not being valued the way you deserve. Relationships should be a space where both people are able to express their true selves without fear of rejection. The moment one person feels the need to suppress their thoughts, needs, or emotions just to maintain the peace, the relationship becomes a place of silent suffering rather than mutual support. A relationship should not feel like an emotional tightrope, where one misstep could mean losing the person you love. If you are constantly walking on eggshells, afraid that one wrong move will make them leave, then what you have is not a secure connection, it is an arrangement based on fear. True love does not ask you to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's life. It does not require you to become someone you are not. It does not make you feel like you have to prove your worth every single day just to be chosen. The people who truly love you will not demand that you submit to them in order to be worthy of their affection. They will respect you for who you are, they will appreciate your individuality, and they will love you without requiring you to lose yourself in the process. Walking away from what devalues you is one of the most difficult but necessary acts of self-respect. People often hold on to relationships long after they should have ended, not because they are happy, but because they are afraid. They fear loneliness, they fear uncertainty, they fear the pain of letting go. But staying in a situation where you are not valued, where you are not appreciated, where you have to fight just to be seen, is far more damaging in the long run than the temporary discomfort of walking away. The ability to leave when you are not treated with love and respect is not an act of weakness. It is one of the greatest demonstrations of strength. When you refuse to walk away from what devalues you, you send a message to yourself and to those around you that your worth is negotiable. You teach people how to treat you by what you are willing to tolerate. If you allow inconsistency, disrespect, or emotional neglect, you are signaling that you do not believe you deserve better. And the truth is, people will treat you according to the standards you set for yourself. If you make it clear that you will stay no matter how poorly you are treated, there is no incentive for change. But when you draw a firm line, when you make it clear that you will not accept anything less than respect, you force people to either step up or step aside. One of the biggest reasons people struggle to walk away from relationships that devalue them is because they hold on to potential rather than reality. They see glimpses of kindness, moments of affection, brief instances where things feel right, and they use those fleeting moments as justification to stay. They convince themselves that if they are just patient enough, if they try a little harder, if they endure a little longer, things will eventually change. But change does not come from wishful thinking. It comes from action. And if someone has repeatedly shown you that they do not value you the way you deserve, hoping that they will suddenly transform into the person you need them to be is self-deception. Another trap people fall into is the belief that leaving means they have failed. They see the end of a relationship as a reflection of their own shortcomings, as if walking away means they were not good enough to make it work. But the truth is, staying in a situation where you are undervalued is a much greater failure than leaving. It is a failure to honor yourself, to prioritize your well-being, to demand the love and respect that you deserve. Walking away is not a sign that you were not enough. It is a sign that you refuse to settle for less than you are worth. Letting go is painful, but so is staying in a situation where you constantly feel unseen, unheard, and unappreciated. The difference is that one kind of pain is temporary, while the other is endless. When you walk away, you may experience heartbreak, sadness, and moments of doubt, but those feelings will pass. And then those feelings will pass. They will fade as you rebuild yourself, as you surround yourself with people who truly value you, as you step into a future where you are no longer begging for the bare minimum. But if you cling to something that is not meant for you, the pain of being unvalued will linger indefinitely. It will become a quiet suffering that you carry with you every day, a weight that holds you back from becoming the person you are meant to be. There is nothing more powerful than knowing your worth and acting accordingly. It is easy to say you deserve better, but it takes true strength to enforce that belief with action. Walking away is not about proving a point to someone else. It is about proving something to yourself. It is about choosing self-respect over attachment, dignity over desperation, and freedom over fear. The right people, the ones who truly value and respect you, will never put you in a position where you have to question your worth. And when you walk away from what devalues you, you make space for the love and respect you truly deserve. The foundation of love is choice, not coercion. True love is never something you have to beg for, chase, or prove yourself worthy of. It is something that is given freely, reciprocated without hesitation, and nurtured with mutual respect. When you understand your own worth, you stop accepting the bare minimum. You stop tolerating inconsistency, disrespect, and emotional neglect. You recognize that love, when real, does not require you to shrink yourself, suppress your needs, or sacrifice your dignity just to keep someone around. Walking away from what devalues you is not a loss, it is liberation. It is a declaration that you refuse to settle for anything less than what you deserve. The pain of leaving will always be temporary, but the pain of staying in a relationship where you are not truly valued is permanent. When you choose yourself, when you stand firm in your worth, you make room for the kind of love that does not require begging, the kind of love that is rooted in respect, in genuine appreciation, in mutual commitment, and that is the only kind of love worth having.